Welcome to the Fastbreak, brought to you by LUTV News InFocus, where we feature interesting topics on campus and in the world of culture. I'm Derrick Thomas. Southeast Texas native Jeremy Long has navigated the communications field from television news and public relations to exhilarating entertainment like combat sports. He is the host of Levels podcast that is featured on the Gorilla Cross Radio Network and also the principal owner of Full Metal Worldwide. Jeremy joins us today to talk about his journey through the communications world. Jeremy, thank you for being on the show, buddy.
Oh, thanks for having me, Derek.
So you actually grew up in Southeast Texas. That's where you got your start at?
Yeah, born and raised in Southeast Texas, man. Went to Nederland High School, class of 2001, which makes me very old now.
So what did you actually get your start in? Like, how did you become involved in communications? Where did you begin to think that that's what you wanted to do in life?
Weirdly enough, I did not originally go to school for communications. I think I was just kind of floating around taking some different classes. And one night in, I think it was like May or June, my freshman year, at the end of my freshman year, I was just online late at night. It was about 2 or 3 in the morning, and I saw a job ad at at the local TV station there, and on a whim, I was like, hey, that seems like a pretty cool job. I sent an email in to the news director, Paul Bergen, and I told him, hey, I don't have any experience. I don't even know really what this job is or entails, but I'm willing to show up every day. I'm willing to work hard. And, if you'll try me out for a couple of weeks, I'll prove to you that I belong in this field. And he emailed me back at 9 a.m. the next morning and said, "Come in, let's talk." And one thing led to another, and before I knew it, I think about a week later, I was sitting on the assignment desk on the weekends
Wow.
at KBTV News, and unpaid. It was an unpaid internship. He was just trying me out for a couple of weeks to see if I would stick. And unfortunately for him, or fortunately for him, I stuck around, man. I kept showing up. I made a lot of mistakes, but I kept showing up and kept putting in the work. And eventually, a few weeks later, he gave me a full-time job.
So what exactly was that full-time job that you got?
My first full-time job in news. So I went from the assignment desk and learning how to work the phones and learning kind of the ins and outs of the newsroom and what each position was to I became a videographer. They gave me a camera. They put a camera in my hands and started teaching me uh, how to properly frame shots and the importance of being able to tell stories visually to support what the reporters were doing on air and everything. And so it was a really good education and something that almost 16 years later I still use on an almost daily basis.
That's amazing. So this job right here, did this kind of lay down the groundwork for the jump to Las Vegas? Like, how did that happen?
Yeah, absolutely. That first job really laid down the groundwork for everything else I would do for, like I said, almost the last 16, 17 years. Um, you know, Not only teaching me how to frame shots and ask the right questions and really listen to the people you're interviewing, as far as, if you're working in news, broadcast TV, but also how to tell a story properly, how to format those stories, and, what moves people and the visuals behind it and how powerful visuals and music and things like that can be to telling your story and to ultimately getting across the point that you're trying to make.
So now that you have the Levels podcast, where did the idea for the Levels podcast come from and what it is about?
The idea, actually, I've been covering mixed martial arts for about 10 years. I mean, it was back in the days of Chuck Liddell and, the early UFC and
Rampage Jackson, those
yeah,
guys.
Paige Jackson and,
Nice.
and all the old school guys. So I had a show that actually aired on TV and we aired it online. It was a little ahead of its time, man. It was called Cage Siders, and it aired on Southeast Texas TV on KBTV on Friday nights, and we did that for about 3 years, and then eventually I would move out here to Vegas, and so I kind of put that show, Cage Siders, to rest, but I still wanted to cover it, and I wanted the show to evolve, kind of like MMA has evolved over the last few years. And so Levels was kind of the brainchild out of that. And the reason we call it levels is because there's levels to this stuff. I mean,
Everything,
you
yeah.
start out down here, and then you start slowly gain experience, and more and more until you're pro. And so there's levels to these things. And so I thought it was a cool play on words, and really it was just kind of born out of that. My love for combat sports, boxing, MMA, sambo, any of these things, and just what I like to do. And given my history with news, I wanted to keep that aspect in place. And so now Levels is here, and we're having a really good time.
That's a great mix. So being out there in Las Vegas, it's huge. Did you have any contact or, with Dana White, or was there any crossover in those points?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We've had Dana White on the show. We've had him in studio. Being here local, Dana over the years has calmed down, if you can believe it or not. Where he was very, he's still very hardcore about his business and his role with the UFC. But if he has time, he tries to make time for local media, which benefits guys like me and benefits a lot of shows. So you wouldn't think a guy that's worth like 300 or $400 million would really make time
Yeah.
for podcasts and different things, but he sees the importance in local podcasts and shows in general that push mixed martial arts because it's a little more mainstream now, but in the beginning, UFC uh, and MMA in general was pushed by these small grassroots shows because mainstream media wouldn't pick it up. It wasn't legal in every state, and shows weren't held in every state. And if shows were held, a lot of those shows weren't very good. So mixed martial arts does, to a sense, owe a lot of its success to podcasts and smaller shows that really helped push it and define it and get it out to the masses.
And then so also, like I mentioned earlier, you're the principal owner of Full Metal Worldwide. What exactly is Full Metal Worldwide?
Oh, thank you for asking, man. Full Metal Worldwide is my marketing company, digital marketing, content creation. I started out here to really capitalize on uh, these companies who haven't quite made that switch over, don't have the resources yet to have a full digital marketing department. Dealing with Facebook ads, dealing with social media, dealing with all the things that traditional media has kind of left behind. Well, that's what my education was in all these years and everything. So I help companies, big and small, capitalize on that, make the most sense of it, and give them direction and give them a pathway to the future, so they're not leaving customers on the table and they're not leaving money and revenue on the table, and at the same time, it's affordable for them. And helps kind of get them caught up to the digital age, where a lot of companies are unfortunately being left behind because they're either they don't know how to do it, or they know they need to do it. They don't have the resources necessarily to do it. We kind of bridge that gap for a lot of people.
So I really felt like in this communications field, you brought three different aspects together. And how did you manage to do that? Because like you said, you brought the marketing, you were able to be up close with the combat sports, and then you also talk about it. So all these different facets, and you brought them together. What did it take to do that?
It took, honestly, it took a lot of trial and error on my part. A lot of the stuff, like I said, I didn't originally go to school for this. So by the time I was even really heavily involved, I was already kind of out there doing my own thing. But I bringing them all together was out of necessity. And a lot of people that grow up in small towns and small areas like Southeast Texas realize that there's not always opportunity every single day to do these kinds of things, at least on a full-time basis. You might get the occasional job here or there, and it's a little bit easier now than it was, like I said, almost 20 years ago. Jesus, I'm old. About 20 years ago, there was even less opportunity in that area. So I just kind of picked and choose, and I was just kind of learning everything I could. I taught myself Final Cut Pro. Well, back then it was Final Cut 7. I taught myself digital editing and nonlinear editing, and I taught myself how to use different audio things and Photoshop, which wasn't readily available unless you were a pro back then. I taught myself a lot of things and put a lot of things together because if you believe it or not, man, I was around for the beginning of YouTube
Oh
and the
man.
beginning of Facebook and these things, and I saw the future. Well, the future was, how we do everything that we're doing now was at, on the cusp back then. And when you kind of look at it, you take a step back and you really look at it, you could see the future being mapped out and these steps that we were going to take to what we're doing now. So I wish I could say it was by grand design. I planned it all out that way, but honestly, it was just out of necessity. I needed to learn these things as I moved through the field and as I moved from job to job and as I gained experience. Well, one thing led to another, and then I got to a different employee, and they were like, "Oh, you know how to do these two things? Do you know how to do this third one too?" And sometimes I would maybe not tell the whole truth, and I would go back and kind of learn these things real quick and be like, "Oh yeah, I absolutely know how to do that." So necessity and just hustle. You can't teach hustle. So
So one more thing, I have to ask, what's next for you in this field? And if you can offer one piece of advice for anyone that was interested in doing what you're doing, what would it be?
wow, one piece of advice. That's hard, man. But you know what? I go back and I've had a lot of employees under me, a lot of people that have come into my different departments and have had zero experience. And the one thing I teach them is kind of going back to what I just said is, man, you have to hustle in this business. If you want to stay in communications or broadcast TV or broadcast anything in this day and age, whether it's PR or marketing or whatever, you have to hustle. Technology, and especially digital technology, is changing on an almost daily basis. And so if you are choosing this line of work to just sit back and hopefully you'll just do this for the next 30 years and collect a paycheck, you're going to be left behind and you're going to be made obsolete. So it's always on you to go out and learn the latest thing and be able to sit back and tell a company properly, or if you work for yourself, to see it for yourself, to go, okay, this is going to be a great social broadcasting tool. It's really going to help us get our message out. This one seems like it's just for fun. Maybe we don't, put as much effort or money into it right now, but we still keep our finger on the pulse of it. So it's really just, it's kind of one of those fields that you only get out the things that you want to get out and the things that you put into it and how much work you put into it. And so, I just tell every single one of my guys that come through and students that come through, whether it's internships or whatever, man, just if you want to do this, you just got to keep hustling and you got to keep pressing forward. That's the only way that this whole communications and broadcast and everything. That's how we move forward, and that's how how we're going to shape the future of this business is by keep pressing ourselves and keep learning and doing, get your hands dirty, get out there. And if you don't learn something, if you don't know something, you got to go out there and learn it. And, just, you got to do it for yourself because it may not pay off right now, but it will eventually pay off in the future. And then for myself, man, I just got to keep rolling along with it, man. There's things, like you said, a year ago, was anybody really messing around with TikTok? Now everyone's on TikTok, and as you get older, you tend to want to stay away from these things because you get married, you have kids, or whatever your personal obligations are. But you just gotta have to dive into it. So while I might personally not have a TikTok, I know all about it. I've read all about it. I know the applications for business aren't quite there yet, but it's getting there. And it's just different things like that, man. You just got to stay on your hustle and stay grinding, man.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate you for the time today, for being on here and all that advice you gave. I really appreciate that.
Absolutely, Derek, man. Nothing but the best for you and the other folks at Lamar, the other kids at Lamar, man. I hope you guys have the best time and really take into account everything that your teachers are teaching you, professors are teaching you, and take it with a grain of salt too, because it's one thing to read it in a book, but it's another thing to get out there and actually do it. So whenever you get the chance to get out there and do it, I hope every single person that sees this embraces it and gets out there and starts that journey.
Thank you for watching the Fast Break, brought to you by LUTV News InFocus. For more LUTV News content, follow us on Twitter and like us on Facebook.